speaking of manufactured freakout,
Okay.
there was an article in The Guardian, and Ken Klippenstein brought this to my attention on Twitter. And we've seen this with terminology when it comes to politics quite a bit. We've seen it for decades now. But he has an article here that goes through what should we call the homeless. So the title is Homeless, Houseless, Unhoused. That like it went from homeless to houseless to unhoused. That was the evolution of what it's politically correct to call homeless people. And I want to read you a passage from this article. They say, some advocates think that the newer word doesn't go far enough. Homeless, houseless, unhoused, they're abstract and kind of euphemisms. I prefer house-deprived, but it's a mouthful, said Jonathan Russell, Chief Strategy and Impact Officer at Bay Area Community Services. So Klippenstein tweets that out, and then right underneath it, he puts what is now the infamous CIA manual called Simple Sabotage Field Manual.
Yes.
About strategic things you could do to undermine movements. And of course, he highlights the passage where they say, now, by the way, I highly recommend everybody read the whole thing because it's like amazing. You read it and you're like, oh my God, this is what happens on the left every single Tuesday.
All the time.
Yeah, like it's all the time.
Like if you think about like all the woke freakouts basically that take these organizations down, it's like word for word out of this manual.
Exactly. So one of the things that's in the manual is like, you need to haggle over precise wordings. And then if people don't agree to the new term you just made up, then you castigate them as, you know, right-wingers and evil and bad and part of the problem or whatever. And it's like, as, you know, he tweeted this out. I'm sure it's sort of tongue-in-cheek and he's joking.
Yeah.
But like, I think he might be right. I think it might actually be. I mean, that's the point I'm at right now. Because sometimes you see these fights and it gets like so absurd and so ridiculous and so pathetic that it's like, this has to be manufactured.
This has got to be an op.
This has to be. Because nobody can be that dumb. I mean, I guess what happens is it could start as like a CIA op, and then there are some gullible people who fall for like the let's fight over the wording all day long.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? But I kind of think it does start as like an op. Because you're just describing a category that exists, and there's nothing about homeless, in my opinion, that is derogatory, that has a negative connotation. Nothing about houseless. Nothing like. So why are we even haggling over the wording? Like sometimes I understand if you want to update the terminology. Like there was a time where when we were kids, they said illegal aliens are coming in the country.
Right.
And then that was changed to illegal immigrants because, you know, it's like they're not aliens. They're people. Like it's a way to try to dehumanize and say they're foreign.
Right.
But then that was moved to undocumented immigrants. And now in a year or two, they're going to change it to something else when we're talking about the same concept.
Yeah.
And it's like at some point, can we just say this is a fair, objective descriptor? Like, I think illegal immigrant is fair. I know they say, well, no person is illegal. But it's like, okay, you can use that terminology if somebody's coming into the country and they're not permitted to come into the country, you're allowed to use that. That doesn't say anything about their humanity or their worth. That you could be, I'm in favor of a humane system that allows people in and abides by human rights, et cetera. But like, I still think it's fair to call it illegal. Like, in other words, I don't think these conversations don't matter. Like, there's no change comes about from playing with the wording to the point of absurdity.
So I mostly agree with you. Let me say a couple of things. First of all, I won't say the language doesn't matter at all, because I do think the difference between illegal alien, undocumented immigrant, like the impression that makes on the public, it does matter. I don't think that, fights over language are just like purely theatrical and have absolutely no impact. But I think they can oftentimes distract from the substance of the real problem of the issue, right? The problem with homelessness isn't people talking about homeless people as homeless people. It's like the fact that people don't have housing and can't afford housing. They're living on the streets and are treated like shit. So let's not distract from the substance of the issue, number one. And number two, let's have a lot of grace for people who, aren't comfortable, don't like the new terminology, or just aren't even aware the new terminology exists. Like, I'm not housing deprived. I've never even heard that before, right? So if you've got someone whose heart is in the right place, who's trying to talk about an issue, and they're using not the most up-to-date PC language, like, let's also have a lot of grace for that. So I don't want to completely discard the idea that language matters. We both spend a lot of time thinking about our words. I spend a lot of time, writing monologues and choosing my words and my language carefully. So language does have an impact, but that should not become the whole fixation of debate. It shouldn't derail, good things and good solutions that people are trying to propose. And it certainly shouldn't be used to shut people out. and, you know, make the club of people who care about homelessness more exclusive. We should be looking for ways to bring as many people as possible into that conversation.
Yeah. I mean, I just think the thing is, it does derail the debate. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's the problem with it, is that becomes then the entire conversation. Like, you know, what do we call these people?
Easy.
And
fighting over a word is easy. Like, actually dealing with the problem is hard.
yeah. And I disagree in the sense that it's not like now that we call them undocumented immigrants, all of a sudden anti-immigration sentiment went away. If anything, it's gone up. Not because it's not a correlation equals causation thing where, like, because we call them undocumented immigrants, now people hate them more. No, I'm just saying, like, that had no impact on anything ever. You know what I'm saying? So don't get me wrong. I'm not saying let's use the most primitive language forever. That's not what I'm saying. But I think the pace at which things are updated, even to the point where a term might be acceptable, but they want to change it anyway, that smells like CIA trickery to me.
Yeah, sure. Yes. But to go back to the immigration example, like, you know, we developed this term dreamers to describe people who were brought here as children. You know, wasn't their choice. They came with mom and dad. And they, you know, became, in the popular lexicon, they were described as dreamers. And they became the most sympathetic group of undocumented immigrants. And it led to this huge bipartisan support for them, you know, receiving legal status and citizenship. And, you know, I think that the compelling, sympathetic nature of their story is the core of that. But that you had language that was consistent with that, I do think helped. Right. I think that helped. Whereas Republicans, you know, they like to use this language of like anchor babies, and they play their own games with language to try to demonize and, you know, make something sound really nefarious, or like ballot harvesting is another example of that. So again, I think in terms of popular sentiment and opinion, language can make a difference, but it's certainly not the end all be all. And it certainly shouldn't be used to like exclude, demonize, et cetera, people who are genuinely trying to participate in a conversation, but maybe just don't like use the right word.
Yeah. I mean, I guess my counter argument is that I feel like with a lot of terminology, we've already reached a place where it's like, that's a good one. And then people are still like, no, that's actually problematic. And it's like,
well,
shut
we
up.
also should just look at, like, housing deprived is a stupid word. Like, it's not a good it's not good terminology. Even he acknowledges, like, this is a mouthful. It's like, yeah, so don't pick it then. Don't try to push in that direction of housing deprived. The argument against, I say homeless, so I'm not against using the word homeless, but the argument that they would use is similar to the one with immigration, where it's like, sort of essentializing the person, like this is the only quality about them.
That's where they all lose me.
Like,
no, because it's just a descriptor. If you are homeless, you are without a home. You are homeless. You don't have a home. Now, I know their response is, well, the world is their home. And it's like, okay, then why are you pretending like this is an issue we need to fix? If you think if the world's their home, I guess they don't need a home. I guess they already have a home, right? So it's like, just stop. The wording is, I agree with you. I'd say the wording is like 80% irrelevant.
Yes.
And they're making it 100% of the picture, where now it's like people, like, you've seen the videos of those DSA meetings where people are yelling at each other. It's like, you just use ableist language. And it's like, oh my God, we're never getting healthcare, dog. Look at my comrades. We're never getting healthcare, dog. Like, that's what I think when I look at that. And again, it smells like CIA trickery to me. It really does. Because it's in the field manual with a perfect description.
I think you also, though, have a lot of like social media. In the same way on the right, you have these social media incentives to like be ridiculous about Bud Light and ceiling fans and gas stoves and pizza ovens or whatever. You know, there's a reward for being the person who like virtue signals the hardest and calls out the person who's not using the right language.
I'm the purist. I'm the purist among us.
There's a
nobody cares. Shut up. Shut up.
An online clout reward.
Yes, of course.
For doing that. So there's also an incentive system. It's in place, separate and apart from the CIA op that has obviously launched this.
Yeah. All right. Well, introduce our guest for us.
Okay. So we are going to be talking to Sohrab Ahmari. He just wrote a book called Tyranny, Inc., which I really recommend. I think it's very thoughtful and very interesting. And if you're an economic lefty, you probably find a lot to agree with in there. I know I certainly did. He is on the right. I think he would consider himself populist right. And he's founder and editor of Compact Magazine, contributing editor to American Conservative Magazine, and contributing writer at New Statesman. And he joins us now.
Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.